of former astronauts. He is the first man to have set foot on the moon, and the 30th anniversary of his feat actually takes place next Tuesday. But today, the astronauts gathering at the Kennedy Space Center are celebrating the launch of the Apollo moon mission that sent man to the moon for the very first time. Let's join in and listen.
Was prohibitive, considered prohibitive. But today we fail not because of our inability to do something. We fail today because of our unwillingness to tackle it in the first place. And that's what we suffer from today, is we are unwilling to take a chance, stick our neck out, and go do some of these things.
I think it's very crucial when we think about going to Mars that we think very carefully and commit ourselves to a growing permanence. To put together the effort that it takes to get there once, twice, three times, and then turn our backs on it would be very sad to me, and I would not like to see that happen. Therefore, I really think we need to tackle the problem of reducing the launch cost and building the kind of reusable spacecraft and rocket systems that will enable us to do a proper job about going to Mars. And to me, that means a mostly reusable heavy lift craft. I could see that growing out of a flyback booster for the shuttle. I could see that particular reusable first stage orbiting a reusable orbiter that takes an economic number of passengers, 80 to 100 people, and a whole new industry of adventure travel, opening this up to lots of people through lottery techniques. To me, that is the key way of progressing back to the moon in preparation to going to Mars. And I really think that can be done by a reasonable 50 years from the time we got to the moon. That's 20 years from now. That certainly is a doable, but we can't sit around on our hands. We've got to start doing some things right now. Otherwise, we'll design a replacement shuttle that will be incapable of supporting during its lifetime, and the shuttle's going to be around for a good while, and the next generation shuttle is going to be around for 20, 30 years. We'll never get to Mars unless we design an adequate next generation shuttle.
All right, just to finish that question, so that because you asked all of us, I think Buzz's number is as good as any. We could do it in 2020 if we committed to it today, so the real question is, when are you going to commit to it? And that's a much tougher question.
Okay, please identify yourself by name and agency if I don't call on you. There's a guy who's been held his hand over the glasses.
Yes, Rory O'Neill, Metro Source Radio. Mr. Aldrin, I wonder if you could give us a little bit of the background into the conversations going on as you decided who was going to be the first one out the door.
We didn't have any conversation about that. It was decided long before we left it off, a couple of months.
No last-minute wrangling?
Yeah. Well, it might make a good story, flipping a coin in lunar gravity, but that isn't the way we did it.
Okay, the guy right behind you. There you go.
Jim McVeigh, WACD Talk Radio. Buzz, a lot of the TV cameras in this room are technological descendants of that little black and white camera you and Neil set up on the moon. NASA Public Affairs loves to promote spaceflight by talking about spin-offs, but the sad fact is the public perceives all of you guys as the equivalent of Magellan or Columbus in our times. The sad fact is the stuff in the historical display seems to be more interesting than the stuff out on the pads today. The shuttle's doing very important research and basic work, but what sort of vehicle do you think is going to have to, I know there's talk about the X-33 and other planes, but do you guys think we will ever go back to the liquid fuel rockets of the 60s?
Well, I certainly hope so. They're much more reusable than solid fuel rockets. They're much more reliable, in my estimation, and you can test them, and reflight is a much more satisfactory thing to contemplate. I think I just can't imagine bringing a solid rocket back and having it have jet engines and then land on a runway. That just doesn't seem reasonable to me.
Okay, we'll go with Peter King at CBS Radio.
And a question for both Neil and Buzz. The later Apollo crews had a lot more time to really express themselves in terms of, how much you really enjoyed yourselves while walking in the moon. I think Gene's crew is a great example of that. You guys were very workmanlike, just task-oriented, you got to get all done in 2.5 hours. If you would, both of you tell us, was it an enjoyable experience and how it was?
To do it again, I'm sure would have meant a lot less pressure, responsibility, and all those things that tend to focus your attention on not making mistakes. And we all like to look good, I'm sure, regardless of the circumstances. And to me, anyway, I think that puts a lot of pressure on us. I know. I guess I enjoy a certain amount of pressure when it's over with, but I'm not sure that I enjoy it in the process.
Well, we had very little time, and they'd, a couple hours, and they'd outlined a lot of tasks for us to do, and we didn't want to disappoint. We tried to get everything in we could. I think I watched Buzz out there trying different kinds of locomotion methods on the surface, which incidentally was his responsibility. He was supposed to do that, but I suspected he was having more fun than I was, because I was hauling rocks at the time.
John Zarella at CNN.
Any one or all of you, was there any one defining moment in your mission that you hold on to more than any other moments, or was it the total event that you remember the most?
I'd vote for touchdown.
I would make a different statement about the whole experience. It happened over 30 years ago now for Apollo 7. And I have to tell you that most of it escaped me. I did not really capture it so much as memories, as a job. I was concerned, as Buzz says, about making sure I didn't make a mistake. And in all honesty, if I didn't have some of the photos and some of the tapes or occasionally to look at, I'm not sure I have honest memories anymore. I have memories of the pictures that I have of it. I mean, the pictures become my memories as opposed to what I think of about being there.
Unlike Buzz, touchdown, it was dynamic, certainly, but a lot of things were going on, a heart beating fast, a lot of apprehension, and you touch down, and boom, you're in the middle of a silent world, and the dust is gone, and yet I didn't have enough time to really enjoy that. What I remember perhaps most is starting up that ladder and looking over my shoulder and looking at those footprints down there and realizing that they were really mine and that there weren't going to be any for a long time to come. And if I just lifted my gaze a little bit and looking over my shoulder on top of the mountain was the earth, was home, was a beauty, which is always overpowering. I think anyone who's seen it in that light just can never forget, take that memory out of their mind.
For me, it was, the entire thing was a highlight, and there were many spectacular moments, but for me personally, the most satisfying event was the final descent.
Okay, the lady with her hand up. Yeah, go ahead.
This Jonathan Walker, NBC News and Newsweek. Neil Armstrong. Do you think that if the first moonwalk had come at a less turbulent time in American history, that it would have loomed larger and maybe sustained further exploration better, that it was a bit of a historical misfortune that it came at a time when the country was so divided?
I don't know how to answer that. We were completely focused, immersed in our project, and we didn't really have the opportunity to spend much time on what was going on in the world around us at that time. I suspect many of you who were around at that time period would be in a better position than we would to answer that question.
Jonathan, my thought would be that with all of the turmoil, the racial turmoil, the war on poverty, Vietnam, all of those things going on at that time, that in fact, one of the reasons that people were so attracted to Apollo and the lunar landing was that it was a highlight. It was something to be proud of, not to be depressed about, not to be complaining about. It was something that the whole world could take pride in.
Okay, Dan Billow at Channel 2 in Orlando.
Right back here, Dan Billow. Mr. Armstrong, I'm curious that on that day 30 years ago today when you lifted off, I'm wondering how confident were you, did you feel at that time that you would actually accomplish this, that you would land on the moon successfully and come back? Did you feel that that was pretty well going to happen or not?
Well, my own feelings wouldn't necessarily mirror the statistics that had been provided to us from the people that study that kind of stuff, but my gut feeling was that we had a 90% chance of, or better, of getting back safely and a 50% chance of making a successful landing.
Of course, I don't think Neil had read that recently published potential press conference that President Nixon was going to hold. It might have had a different impact.
Okay, we'll take one. You've had your hand up a while. Go ahead. White shirt. Identify yourself.
John Silko, MIT News Office. Could you each address those people in the Apollo program, industry, and government that you feel were most responsible for the success of Apollo? Specific names that you
Oh, boy. I don't think you can single out people. There were so many different categories. From MIT, there was great contributions in navigation and guidance. From other places, certainly the rocket launchers and their evolution, the gutsiness of deciding to go with hydrogen fuel in the upper two stages, designing the life support systems, the whole progression of starting with Mercury, putting in a holding program called Gemini in between with the different objectives that it had that led to the necessary
I agree with Buzz completely. You think about the guy that did the cavitating venturis in the limb, or the guy that did designed the little pump in the backpack that pumped water, or the guy in the service module engine with those great nozzle controls. All those things were new that had never ever been done before. And to pick out which of those guys, all those guys were key, because without each one of those guys, we might not have done it. It's a big list.
Okay, we'll take a question from Mark Carreau from the Houston Chronicle.
Yes, Mr. Armstrong, do you still think every day about being the first man on the moon? Is it something that you think about as you wake up each day or go to bed at night? And, or do you have a perspective on that event in your life that you can tell us about a little bit? Or do you wish it hadn't been you? Are you glad?
Yeah, I'm delighted. I was delighted to work with these guys. I'm delighted to be in that project. I'm delighted with the success we had, but I don't think about it on a day-to-day basis. Probably only when you guys remind me.
I think we'll take a question over here. Stefano?
Stefano Poledano, Department of Mechanics. Mr. Armstrong, when you first landed on the moon, your pulse was about 160 beats per minute. Was that excitement for being on the moon, or was it because you were worried about you were low on fuel?
Now that's about my normal heartbeat when I'm landing craft, and we have a lot of records from all my days in the X-15. And when I was landing the X-15, I was running around 160, something like that. That was typical. If I were down at 120, I'd be worried about whether I was really interested in the job. Pumping it up.
Okay, we'll take a question over here. Phil Chin.
Neil wants to chime in also. You've been asked a lot about walking on the moon, but as pilots, what was your thought as a test pilot as you landed on the moon, and what were your feelings as a human being now that you've accomplished this great goal that mankind had for so long?
I doubt that my feelings were much different than these guys, as they as they went through specific points on their individual flights that were important to them to accomplish, and they would, without which the next flight couldn't happen. So in this case, I don't know that I can pick out a specific answer.
How was your feeling just as a human being that you accomplished Kennedy's goal on landing on man on the moon?
Well, after we landed, after touchdown, Buzz and I recognized that the program, this third of a million or 400,000 people, had been working for 10 years to try to do just that. And we put our mark on it and said, you guys did it. It happened. And we shook hands that all those Apollo folks actually achieved the goal.
I believe, is that the Dayton Daily News?
I guess this question for Mr. Armstrong and Mr. Aldrin, since you get the least time on the moon. A little bit ago you talked about the intense workload you had and how busy you were. Do you think NASA should have built time into the flight plan just for a few moments of the human experience? And is that something that perhaps is still an oversight in building up the schedule for space flight?
I don't think so. If they'd built in 3 or 4 minutes, we'd have spent most of this press conference talking about what we were thinking about during those 2 or 3 minutes. I frankly felt, as a transportation person, knowledgeable in the orbital mechanics and maybe along for the ride on the rocket part, that the activities on the surface, we were just doing the best we could as pilots, test pilots, to try and make like scientists, and we, did whatever we could. But that certainly, to me, was not the main priority of our mission, anyway.
I agree.
Okay, we'll take a question right here in front.
Christoph Lahn, German television. Question to Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. Did your life change more after your mission than you expected before?
I don't have expectations that include, what is really going to happen. Maybe I don't look forward enough, but I do think I'm a visionary person when it comes to some aspects. But, where it's going to affect me, I don't know. But certainly you can't participate in such a momentous program and not have the reminders of it have an effect on your life. And I'm sure all of our lives have changed significantly since then.
Question over here, the lady.
Shannon Moore, Channel 2. If you could each please respond to this. Explain to us, how does it feel to be here tonight among fellow Apollo astronauts?
I wish there were a lot more of us here than just the 4 of us. I'd like to see a big crowd all get together.
I find that it's a very rewarding experience to get together these days. I have to let you in on a little secret. Back in the days of Apollo, when we were all in the same office and all running around competing for the few seats that were available on space flights, and everyone feeling like they were the best in the world, there was frequently a lot of competition. It was rewarding, working together, but yet there was always, it was like everybody was the North Pole of a magnet, all kind of together. And after the program, you kind of flew apart a bit, and only now, at least speaking for myself, can I appreciate the magnitude of what we accomplished in an unself-conscious way. And I find every time I get together with the guys, I just have newfound respect for what they did. And I feel fortunate that I was able to participate in such a magnanimous, huge program.
Okay. How does it feel to be here tonight?
Well, just to put a different spin on tonight, we're going to have a chance to meet with a large number of Apollo people that came back who worked on the program, primarily here in the Kennedy area, but also from other parts of NASA. And that's going to be a special treat, because it won't be just crewmen, but it'll be all the folks that got us there, and that's nice.
I think all of you communicate to to the American people and to the people of the world. And I think it would be remiss if I didn't communicate the thanks that I think all of us have for the support that the media has given in communicating the story of spaceflight, and in particular of Apollo, and now to communicate to all the people just how much we thank them for the opportunity over the years to have been so fortunate, to have been in the right place at the right time, and then had the cards dealt that gave us the opportunities that we had. What a wonderful gift for a person to receive in his life.
Okay, we've got time for just a couple more questions. We'll take one from Jacques Tijoux.
Jacques Tijoux, Radio France International. Just to have a small quote that could be understood in French, could you, each of you, tell me if you would like to go back, maybe not to the moon, but to space? Yes or no?
Well, that's easy.
Yes.
I mean, who would say no?
How long do I have to train?
You know, but I'll be perfectly candid and honest. If I go back, I want to go back to the moon. I want to go back to a place I once lived. I want to see what it's like today, a generation later. That's where I want to go.
I'd be perfectly happy just to go back into space, and I would savor the moments a lot more this time. I would probably work less and enjoy it more.
Alan McBride.
Alan McBride, Florida's Radio Network. This is for each of you gentlemen. It's a question on behalf of my 15-year-old nephew. Question is, what do I have to do in personal commitment to get to Mars?
Well, clearly, one person can make a difference, but it can't swing a nation normally. I suspect it'll take public will, first and foremost. Public will has to be on the side of going. And if that's there, I believe technology will probably step up to their part of it. Then there's the question of who and how is that supported with assets, finances, and so on. That's a bigger question that I'm not in a position to answer, but it'll be a start.
Commit himself to his dreams. Don't wait for it to happen. Go out and help make it happen. Don't ever count himself out. He may surprise himself. He may be able to reach a little bit further than he thought he ever could, accomplish a little bit more than he ever could, and one day, he might surprise himself like those of us sitting here and find himself someplace they never, ever thought was possible. Needs a lot of help from a lot of other people, as Neil said. The timing has to be right, but one individual perhaps cannot change the world, but he can make a difference in his own life, certainly.
I think you have to have an open mind dedicated to curiosity and see if you can create something to do things better. By looking into things that way, I think you will develop that curiosity and that desire to want to be a part of it.
When I was 15 years old, if someone had stood up in front of the classroom and told me, you've really got to pay attention, do the best you can because it could take you to the moon someday, I would have thought they were crazy. But they would have been telling the truth. The same thing is true today with young people, 15 years old. We cannot even imagine where they're going to go.
Okay, we'll take one final question from Sue Butler.
Neil, in view of the fact that this nation is not really pushing ahead for Mars and all we do is go around and around us, don't you feel you could have made, or you could still make a difference with Congress in persuading the powers that be because of your stature as being the first man on the moon? Could you speak out publicly more in favor of space exploration, real exploration?
Well, I think I've done quite a lot. It seems to me I've done a lot, spoken at a lot of public forums over the years. Now, I have not specifically favored endorsed a national project to go to Mars. I haven't been asked. I didn't do that. My answer about Mars to a different question. That was a personal response. Maybe I'll try to do better.
Would anyone like to make any final comments?
I think it's appropriate. I felt this way for a long time because over the years, I think you and a lot of your colleagues have questioned Neil's devotion to privacy, even criticized the fact that he wasn't more open on a daily basis with the press like some other people are. Maybe he wasn't comfortable with that, but for whatever reasons, he had his own reasons. And I'd just like to say, it could have been anyone who walked on the moon. It could have been Neil, first on the moon. It could have been Buzz. It could have been Walt. It could have been any one of our colleagues. But I don't think any one of us who would have had that opportunity could have handled it with as great and as honorable dignity as Neil Armstrong has handled the responsibility of being the first human being to step foot on the surface of the moon.
Anyone like to make any more comments? Okay, thank you for coming, and happy anniversary to Apollo 30.
Shake hands for us, please.
A truly remarkable news conference that went on for perhaps 40 minutes there at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. We were watching 4 of the astronauts who participated in the Apollo space missions back in the 1960s. The lead man there, the man sitting on the left, Neil Armstrong, the first human being to set foot on the moon. He was joined, there he is right there in the tan suit. He was joined by his colleague on that Apollo 11 space flight, Buzz Aldrin. We truly heard some remarkable things from these men who are now, as you could see, in their late 60s. All of them said to a man they'd love to go back into space. I believe it was Eugene Cernan said he'd like to go back to the moon. They all talked about how much they regret the fact that the space program has pretty much gone quiet in terms of exploring the moon. The last time someone was on the moon was 1972. It was a program, the Apollo program went on for several years, but then it stopped. We heard Neil Armstrong and all the others say that they feel like they're a part of the history books now, that this is something that children in schools in the United States study as part of a history lesson rather than a science lesson. And they all expressed regret about that. And at one point, we heard Buzz Aldrin say that he thought that if there was a will in the United States to resume a space effort to Mars, that he thought that the United States and other nations working together could get to Mars by the year 2020, 20 years from now. Miles O'Brien, CNN space correspondent, are you there again with us at the Kennedy Space Center?
Yes, hello, Judy.
Miles,
Yes, I am, Judy.
I've been saying what a remarkable news conference this was.
It was. You sort of wish they could go on, and you know they could, because that really was the tip of the iceberg when they start telling those stories. One thing we should point out, he did settle a long-running debate among historians and journalists. Just what were his intended words when he set foot on the planet? One small step for man or one small step for a man? Well, he apparently settled that. He meant to say a man. He would like us to put the parenthesed article in his quote.
Miles O'Brien at the Kennedy Space Center. We've been watching 4 of the Apollo astronauts on this 30th anniversary of the launch of Apollo 11, the space mission in which men first set foot on the moon. And we should add that Neil Armstrong said that he didn't think of that saying about one giant step for mankind until he landed there on the surface of the moon. I'm Judy Woodruff. Thank you for being part of our special coverage of this news conference today. We're going to take a break. Moneyline. We'll be right back.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.